Rita, is that your name?
I think so.
Is your middle name Jean?
Yeah.
And what was your maiden name?
Lunas.
Lunas?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Spell it.
Rita Jean Lunas.
L-O...
S.
No,
L.
L-U-N-I-S.
Luna.
Well, we're recording all of this now, and now Nancy's going to talk to you. And Ron, come on in. You can talk too.
Okay.
All right.
Okay? I'm pretty sure it's recording because it says it is, or unless I paused it, which is...
No, it's recorded. It says it is. You're good.
Okay.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
Where-
And by the way, where were you born?
I was born in Bulger, Pennsylvania.
Is that in Pennsylvania?
That's a
In
stupid
the
question.
northern
I know it's a stupid question. We're trying to just get loosened up here.
Yeah.
And did you have parents or were you adopted?
I was born to Stella and Gus Lunas.
Okay.
I had 7 sisters and 1 brother.
And some of them were quite a bit older, yes?
Quite a bit. I was the youngest. The oldest was 17. And I was born when she was 17.
But they came from different parents, right? So
Tell me where your grandparents came from.
My grandparents. My grandmother was born and raised in Pennsylvania. My grandfather to my grandmother was born in Belgium. They married, heaven knows when, because it was a long time. They had 13 children.
Whoa.
And I think 9 survived. 5 girls and 4 boys.
what were not the children's names, but the grandparents' names?
Well, Catherine O'Hara
Okay.
and John Penderville.
Oh, okay. So she married and became Catherine Penderville.
She
All right.
became Catherine Penderville.
Okay.
My
Dad's side.
my dad's side was born. My dad was born in Belgium in 1893 or 83. He came to the United States with his mother, his 3 sisters, and himself. I think it was like in the early 1900s.
He came through Ellis Island, right?
Yeah, he came through Ellis Island. So, if he was born in, he came over in '89 because he was only 6 years old when he came over.
So what about the father?
The father had come to the United States. Grandpa came 2 or 3 years ahead of the family.
Okay.
He settled in McDonald, Pennsylvania, where they were all raised. And after he got into the United States, they had 1 more child, which was George. So they had Gus, Mary, Rose, Ferdinand, and George. That was their name. That was their names.
And his name was what? Was he Polydor?
My grandfather's name was Polydor Lunas.
Okay. That's a great name.
My grandmother's name, that's one, I think it was Cecilia, but I'm not sure. My grandfather was, the height was, he was 6'4". My grandmother was under 5 feet.
Okay. I thought he was like 6'6", but no 6'.
Oh, yeah. What did I say?
6'4". He was taller than John and I.
He was about 6'3" and a half or 4.
Oh, okay, so he's same
Yeah,
height, tall.
mhm,
Okay.
somewhere around there.
That's pretty tall, especially for
Very,
those
very
days.
tall man. Very, very strong man. And
And this was the Lunas.
this
side.
was the Lunas, right?
Okay.
Right. My grandfather, I gave you their names. The names of their children was, my mother was first, Stella.
Nor.
No, not Nora, she was younger. It was Stella, Katie, Nora, and Marie. And another name. What else? There was another one. And the boys' names were Bud, John, Francis, and I'm sure there was a John in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. That was their names.
No Gustav. Well, that was Grandpa's side, so anyhow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had lots of. My mother had 8 children. My Aunt Maggie had 8 children. And the rest all had 3 and 4 and 5 and so on.
How many of them
I
stayed in the
think
same area?
together, I think my grandmother had 29 grandchildren.
Gosh. Were they mostly within visiting distance, or?
Oh, we all
spread
lived in
out
the
all
same
over place?
town.
Wow.
And I know everybody lived in the same town at that time.
But that's still McDonald, but you guys moved to Bulger.
We all lived in Bulger.
Okay, so they had migrated.
My dad's family lived in McDonald.
Okay.
All my aunts and uncles resided in McDonald, which was 6 miles away from us. Okay.
And then grandma's.
Which grandmother?
No, I mean, okay, so who lived in Bulger?
My mother's whole family lived in
Okay,
Bulger.
so it was grandma's family. Okay.
My mother's whole family lived in Bulger, with maybe the exception of one uncle, but he lived elsewhere. But everybody else, I remember when I met John for the first time and we walked through town, he said, "Who lives here?" And I'd say, "That's Uncle so-and-so." And that would be Aunt so-and-so. And this one was my cousin. He said, "Does anybody else live in this town but the Lunases?"
But they didn't live in Bulger?
Dad did, yes, but he didn't come in till after he was in the military. Don't forget he came out of the service.
So he was
They
born-
were farmers before that. They sold the farm and moved into a smaller town.
Oh, okay, because he was born in Raccoon, wasn't he, Dad?
Dad was
Raccoon?
born in, yeah, your father was born in Raccoon.
Which was like next to Pig Ear and...
Pig Ear.
Yeah.
Pig Ear was the big mining town.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
All right.
In
Oh,
our-
yeah, because you were saying most all of them were miners at one point.
We lived in a coal mining town. In other words, we were surrounded by coal mines. And
But Bulger itself really there wasn't mining there.
oh yes, there was.
Oh, okay.
Well, Aunt Hortense lived right next door to a mine,
Oh, okay.
across the tracks.
Oh, God, she lived on the railroad tracks and
Mhm.
next door to a mine.
Mhm.
All right.
And the mine was about 3/4 of a mile away from her house.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And that's how everybody made their living. My mother's husband was killed in the coal mine,
Her first husband.
her first husband.
That was by then.
And whenever my mother's first husband was killed, she had 3 children at that time and expecting May.
Whoa. Who were the 3 that she had?
She had Lillian, Catherine, and Leonard.
And she was expecting May.
And May was born exactly 7 months after he died. My dad, first wife, did not survive the
Spanish.
epidemic of the
Spanish
plague.
flu. Spanish
Yeah.
flu. Yeah.
Yeah.
1919.
She lost they lost her newborn baby,
Oh.
and 2 sons, and Orton survived, and my dad. And everybody else was wiped out. And my little 5-foot grandmother took care of them all. And she survived all that. She never caught it. And nobody knows why.
Because Grandpa had it, but then he woke up.
Dad had it. They thought he was also going to die. They got Hortense out of the house before she contacted it.
Okay.
And that's the only reason she survived.
Because he kind of woke up to everybody gone, really.
Wow. And then, years later, my mother had a family. My dad had 1 child. He loved children. So he married my mother, who had, at that time, 5 children. So,
They didn't bring Hortense with them, right?
Hortense lived with my grandmother and grandfather until she was almost 14. And then my mother said she has to come and live with us because we cannot afford to give your mother and dad money to raise her when we're raising all these others. We can make do with the money that we're spending on her over there.
So Grandpa and Grandma then had you and Helen
Yeah,
and that marriage.
yeah,
There was one that passed away, wasn't there?
yeah. Virginia passed away.
And that was through Grandma and Grandpa as
Yeah,
well.
right.
So before or
So
after
sister.
you? Before or after you and Helen?
Before.
Okay. All right. So and then Hortense came in at 14. And
At
you
14, yeah.
You were young.
And the reason Hortense came in, I'll remember this yet. We were picking cherries out of the cherry trees. I was only probably about 5 years old.
Hmm.
And Hortense wanted a new pair of shoes. And my mother said, "You can't have shoes because the other one, somebody in the group, needed a pair of shoes worse than you do." Hortense proceeded to tear her soles off because she had been living with her grandmother and grandfather and got everything she ever wanted in her life. And my mother said you weren't getting them, so she proceeded to take off. So my mother said, "Okay, you're really gonna work for this one." And my mother was a strong woman, but she knew how to raise children.
How old was Hortense at that point?
Oh, Hortense was 12 or 13. Just at the age where she knew better than my mother.
Yeah. But you two hit it off big time, didn't you?
Oh,
Yeah.
Hortense. When we were growing up, we had the most wonderful grow up life because my dad had gotten into business by then. We had a little bit more money. And my dad looked forward to dinner. He really loved his dinner because he got to have dinner all by himself. Nobody in the kitchen, because somebody had to be at the garage to take care of the garage. My dad would sit in the kitchen and we would proceed. We all sang.
Nice.
And we would all sing all through his dinner.
Because you all had already
And,
eaten.
and as
Yeah.
he would pick up his coffee to get done with the dishes, we would take his saucer. And he said, I know it's time to quit. But we had the greatest times. And then Hortense, every time she would take the tablecloth off the table, she did her tablecloth dance. And believe me, we were 6 girls that had the most wonderful life together. We had a ball. And I was only real young. But I was the lead singer.
Okay, that's right. You and Leonard
Oh,
both.
you never sing. I don't hear you sing.
And I can't sing anymore
Ah.
because I've lost that ability.
She had
with them
surgery
in
on
my
the vocal
throat.
cords.
Oh.
Yeah.
And but I had a good voice, and I had singing lessons and dance lessons
Nice.
and everything.
Now, how far did you have to go to get those, or was the town big
It
enough?
was no, we went to the next town, which was only 2 miles down the road.
Which one was that one?
And he was a good dancer and a good instructor. In fact, after I started to take dancing lessons, Leonard, my brother, took dancing lessons and also singing lessons from you.
Hmm.
And he was very popular in the Pittsburgh area. He sang with all the big bands.
Wow, so you made a career.
Every Friday, every Saturday, he sang at this great big nightclub.
At what age? When
Probably
he
starting
started?
at 17, 18.
Wow.
He was on the radio for a while. Whenever,
Because you sang at each other's weddings, didn't you?
yeah,
Yeah.
we sang Ave Maria at each other's weddings.
So, because you both knew operatic
Mm,
training.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, we both sang.
well, when she sang in church, I mean, you heard her over everybody. It was amazing. So,
My voice, I was known to have a good voice. And Leonard had one too.
I remember that.
Yeah. But we had, I would say, we had a good childhood. And then, of course, everybody. And then another thing that I have to say is, when I was 6 years old, my mother gave me a birthday party. And I had a birthday party with all my friends there. And Lillian and Dave at
Dave was
that
the
time
husband,
were
the wife.
were dating.
Oh.
And he came over in his convertible, which he always had a convertible. Dave always had a
Until
convertible.
the time I was around, it was a convertible.
And he came over that day, and for some reason, either I heard it or something, because I was always in on my sister's conversations because I was always around them, you know, the older ones. And I told them, I said, you look like you're going to get married. And Dave had never forgot that. That was the night they got married. They ran away and got married.
What?
Because they had planned to.
They had planned, and evidently Rita had heard some little thing about marriage. So she blurted it out, and my sister was ready to kill me. But my mother didn't catch on.
Ah,
Oh, okay.
And Lillian was the first one to leave home.
Because she was your maid of honor, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So.
But she ran away and got married that night? Is that
She
what you're saying?
ran away and got married that night.
Didn't they all elope?
What?
Catherine eloped. Well, it was during the Depression, Nancy.
Right, so it's not like easy.
And there
to
was
run
no
away.
way that you could afford a wedding or
So
anything
it's
like
almost
that.
like
Right.
being good to the parents.
Yeah.
To,
So they didn't have any expense. All they had to do was put on their best frock,
Go to
And go to the Justice of the
There you
Peace.
go.
and away they would go. So they were the only ones that got married in the church was Leonard, Hortense, and myself. The others all ran away and got married.
Oh wow.
But we had a good time growing up. I had a good time in school. I was one of the most popular girls.
Nice.
But you were on the basketball team and everything. 'Cause that's when
Yeah.
Dad comes into the picture, right? After them. Because you guys, okay, so Grandpap had the big business. I mean, the store, the gas station, the garage. You had built apartments overhead. You guys moved into that.
Yeah,
So, but it was only you
and Helen.
and Helen at that point. So the family that had all been married.
Mhm.
That was early. So, yeah, that was like. So you're in the middle of Washington County.
Right.
And then Grandpap built in where all the roads came together for all those towns, basically in Bulger.
Well, there was only one time. There was only one road.
I guess.
We had dirt roads that came into our road, but we only had one main road
And that was called. That
through
was.
town.
It was just a route number, wasn't it?
It was a route number, but don't ask me for the route number because it completely slips my mind.
Because I
And
think.
you're allowed to forget one or two things.
Yeah, but it was all made out of red dog.
No,
What?
all the other dirt roads coming in were made out of red dog.
What's red dog?
Red dog is what you get whenever you have mining. And they put
Okay.
up all the old coal and it starts burning itself down. You use that for the roads back there and they called it Red Dog Road.
Coal
Which
that wasn't
means
good for market.
it was actually red and
But you didn't light it on fire.
No, it went down
No.
to the road.
it went on
It was like
after
a gravel.
it was like a gravel after it got down
After it
to
was burned.
it burned itself down
Got
to,
it.
to a certain area. Then they used it for the road service.
You never wanted to fall on
No,
it because the sulfur. Yeah,
Oh.
and my
it burned.
and Chuck, which was Hortense's husband, worked on what they call the WPA,
Sure.
which was the road crew. And my mother raised chickens, and we raised eggs. And we wanted a chicken, we went out and killed the chicken. And my grandmother had them too. So we had this little shack in the back, which we made for a chicken coop, as they call them.
Mhm.
And my mother would every year send away for a dozen new chicks in the eggs.
Mhm.
And we would watch them hatch
Mhm.
in the house. We'd put them next to the radiator
Keep 'em
where the
warm.
furnace was warm, and we would raise our little peeps, and we would watch them open up and become peeps and all that stuff. And we had one that the three youngest ones grew attached to. Well, that chicken, she was the favorite. She would come in every noon at noontime, go in the closet and lay her egg, and then walk back out.
So she was allowed in the house. She was the only one allowed in, I guess.
She was the only one allowed in the house. My brother-in-law, being he worked in the road gang, he would find things that were homeless,
Animals.
like rabbits. So he brought me home rabbits,
This Hortense's husband.
Hortense's husband. He brought me home rabbits. He brought me home 2 lambs.
Wow.
These lambs were driving my dad crazy because he said every morning they're waking me up.
Well, they had bells on, didn't they, or something? Like
Yeah.
that?
And they would follow me to try to follow me to school, and I'd have to run back with them and put them in the cage. So my dad said, he said, these animals are getting too big for our little place that we have here. So my dad, unbeknownst to everybody, made arrangement with a friend to come in and butcher them. When my dad butchered those 2 lambs, nobody in the house would speak to him. We completely ignored him like he didn't exist because we were mad because he killed the lambs, and none of us would eat his lamb. He had to give it all away.
Yeah, I remember that one. His story that you told about that.
Yeah.
That's probably the last time you ever did anything.
Yeah, it's last time you ever touched an animal. I remember one time across from us, over where the schoolhouse was, a dog, a big shepherd dog, had pups. My dad couldn't stand to see those pups die because the mother got killed on the road. So he brought them all home. And they were fine at first, they were just pups. And then one day, this was the end of 2 of them. They had to go right away. My mother hung up all her clothes, and after she finished hanging up all the clothes, they took them all off the line. So she had to rewash all of the clothes.
And laundry was an all-day thing back then.
And she said, those 2 have
Keep
to,
the water.
those 2 have to go.
So you gave them away.
Yeah. And John, when John was born, we lived close to my mother and dad because of all the problems I
John,
had.
your
My
son.
son. That dog, my mother and dad's business was a half a mile away from where John and I lived. He would come down every morning, sit on the front step until it was time for me to take my walk up to see my mother and dad. And that dog would walk with us and keep John on the outside of the road.
Keep him out of the road.
Uh-huh.
Hurt him. Yeah.
And then he'd walk us all the way back home. And then he'd go home to mums and dads.
Well.
But he was a great dog.
Wow.
That was Brownie.
Oh, that was Brownie. Was he the one that picked up the roasts? No, that was.
No, that's another kid. That's after we got married and everything.
And you had your own dog.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a dog when John and I first got married. Everybody, for one thing, my special dog got killed the week before we got married.
Cubby.
Yeah, Cubby. And when he got killed, everybody in Bulger says, "Oh, John, you're not going to have no wedding this week," because Rita probably expects you to have that dog killed because he didn't like you in the first place.
Oh, the dog would always growl every time he got close to me.
Every time he got close to me, he'd growl at him. So.
But fortunately, Dad was out of town.
Dad was in New York. Just
He was in New York.
And, but anyhow, what was I going to say after that?
The new dog.
Oh, then everybody, when we first got married, being I lost my dog, they said, "Oh, Rita, you have to have another. You can't live without a dog. You've always had a dog." So his friend gave us his dog, and he was a hound. And I tried to teach him to do this and that, but I wasn't having any luck, so I kind of gave up on him. But one thing he got noted for in the neighborhood was he would steal everything that was outside
On porches.
on the
That's not
porches. He would bring it back to our place and put it on our porch. One day, a woman, for some reason, she was doing something with a roast, and she put it outside
Oh dear.
in a pot. That she was fermenting it or something, or
Probably
doing
carrying, like,
something.
corn, maybe, yeah, corned beef or something.
Yes, doing something to it, you know. Well, lo and behold, I walk outside, and not only did she bring the roast home, but she brought the whole pot home.
Must be a good sized dog to be able to carry it.
She was only like 4 feet long and 2 feet high.
Yeah,
You know, you wouldn't expect her to be able to pick up.
No.
yeah, but she
But
did.
that's pretty much, there's a lot in between, but I could go on forever.
Well, just tell us how you met your dad, met John.
John, I was in high school,
And Dad was already out of the military. at this
and
point.
he was out of the military. He was over 4 years older than me, almost 5. So my dad, of course, John was wanting to take me out, and my dad said no.
You were a senior.
I was a senior in high school, but he still said no. He said, you are, you know, he said, you're much older than Rita, and I don't think it's advisable. So we didn't go together for a while. And
Because Dad started showing up at all your.
yeah, so what John did was John would appear on the scene at all the baseball, the basketball games,
When you played it.
and watch me play. And things that I went to in high school, he would, like, I went to the prom one time, and he was sitting up in the balcony watching the prom dancers. So eventually my dad gave in finally at the age of 17, when I was a senior. My dad finally gave in and said, as long as you go on a double date with her sister, you can go. And that's the first time I got to go out with him.
With Helen.
Yeah.
Oh, which is why that relationship with her, because that was with Henry, I guess she was dating.
Yeah.
So that's why you guys just remained best friends through.
Yeah,
Because it's all 4 of you knew each other from
We
double dating.
And
Yeah.
they did get married. They all got
Yeah,
married.
yeah.
Yeah. Because Dad, now Grandpap, the interesting thing, because Dad did not get to talk from
Oh,
Grandpap.
whenever we got married,
Yeah.
all my brother, the day we got married, all my brother-in-laws, we had a wild bunch. I mean, Chuck was enough for everybody. I mean, he would be the instigator of everything. Chuck was a prankster, and he loved to pull pranks on people.
He was funny.
Marty was the agitator. Dave wasn't there because he couldn't. He had his business. He was making money. And those two, Tex was iffy, you know.
He'd go along with
He'd go along with the crowd. But anyhow, they told John, they said, have you had the talk yet? And John says, what are you talking about? He said, nobody takes Cusses' daughter without a talk. You all have to sit down and have the talk. John said, I haven't had a talk. They said, what's going on here? You're the only one out of 6 of us that haven't had the talk. My dad never said a word to John. He said, I knew I never had to say a word to that man. I knew he was the right one.
Nice.
Yeah. You want to start when I met him, right? And
Wait.
how I met him.
Well, you met him at the gas station. I think you told us
No,
that.
well, then after my memory started to straighten
Oh.
out, I realized. Anyhow, I have a sister-in-law that was named Bess,
Okay.
and she met John because she worked at the gas station all the time with a sister and my dad and her husband.
And she was married to Uncle Leonard by then.
Yeah, she was married to Leonard. So John came into town, and he was the new try to catch every woman in Boulder was out.
Back from the military.
Best, and he had his uniform on yet.
Ah.
And Bess saw him, and I walked up to the garage this day, and she said to me, I found him. I said, you found him. She said, the guy that's just perfect for you. He's so sweet, he's good looking. And she said, and you gotta meet him. And Helen said, in due time, he'll come in sometime. Beth says, oh, okay. So that night we didn't feel like walking home for some reason. So Bess had the car. So she said, well, I'll drive you up home. So we get in the car, and Bess proceeds to pull in John's driveway. She was going to toot the horn so that I could meet him. And I said, no, I'm not going to meet this man this way. But that's the first encounter. I knew that there was a new guy in town, because Bess kept me abreast of everybody that was,
I see. Okay. That sounds
that
like
was coming into town. So anyhow, she always liked John. So anyhow, then down the road, I started to work at the gas station more often because it was summertime. And he would always, unbeknownst to me, he would always come in after work
Uh-huh.
and stop and pick up a Coke or something like that to have before he went home. So he'd stop at the gas station. He'd always talk to Helen and Bess. He didn't know me. So we met at that time. And then from then on, he found out that I played basketball whenever school was in, because we were at
Summer break.
summer break. So we wouldn't be playing for quite some time. So anyhow, he would come in and out of the gas station.
And somebody finally introduced you.
And, oh yeah, he introduced himself, because he knew Bess and Helen and everybody. So he introduced himself.
And Bess had probably put a good word in for you or something.
Probably about that time. But anyhow, down the road, say 6 months down the road, I started playing basketball, and all of a sudden he would appear at the basketball games. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know he was there, except I could see him up there,
Well,
every-
that's not for that.
Yeah.
But that went on for the entire time that basketball went
Winter.
on. He and Don Zalazzi came in. Every time we played in Burgettstown, if we played out of town, of course, they didn't show up because they didn't know the schedule.
Mm.
So it went on like that for a while. And then one night he asked my dad if he could take me home. Dad says, yeah, you can take her home, but not on that thing that you ride around on.
Which
If
was
I
a-
ever see her on it, you'll never see her again on that thing.
What is the thing?
That was a motorcycle.
Oh, okay.
So he had a car, but he had a great big old, he had a Buick at that time. Great big thing. Nobody single would need a big car like that. But that's what he could afford, and that's what he had after he got out of the service. And
What type of motorcycle?
Harley Davis,
It was a Harley Davidson.
yeah,
Hmm.
and a white Harley Davis,
White.
trimmed in black.
Mm.
And it was a pretty thing. And he always told John, he said, you can walk her home, you can take her home in the car, but you will never put her on that bicycle. Because if I ever hear of it, that's the end.
This is when you were a senior in high school,
Yeah,
so it was you
Yeah.
were allowed to see him.
I was finally allowed to see him. He was allowed to walk me home, let's put it that way.
Okay,
I
not
wasn't allowed to
dates,
go
yeah.
out with him on a date, but he could walk me home.
all right. You were telling us last time. Ultimately, you could go out if you went with Helen and Henry.
And if Helen and Henry were going, if there was something prime thing, like Halloween parties and
Mhm.
stuff like that, and dances that they had at the little town down below us, they'd have a dance every once in a while. We were allowed to go I was allowed to go with John as long as Helen was with me.
So how did the motorcycle end up on the porch?
Well, one day, he had it for quite some time now. And he was always had somebody on that motorcycle with him. Always some cousin, some girl, whoever.
Yeah, that's right. He was dating several people, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he had, at that time, he had 5 girls.
Wow.
He had one in Midway, me and Balger, and one in Sturgeon, and one in Midway, 2 in Midway. And he was dating all of us at that time.
Where did he live?
Who, John?
Yeah.
He lived, from the garage, he lived down about a half a mile.
So same town as you.
Same town, and from our home, it was about a mile and a half.
So it wasn't the house that I remember then.
Yeah, it was the one on the hill.
The one on the hill that Grandma
Yeah,
had on. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
That was the one that, that's whenever we started
Yeah, because we used
dating
to walk to that one.
on to my mother's delight, but my dad wasn't too happy. He didn't want me dating anybody because I was only 17 years old. And I was still in school. So he thought that was just a little bit too old.
Too young.
Yeah.
Well, that he was too old.
No, that-
John was too old. Yeah, yeah. Took him a while until he decided he finally liked the man. And
So the motorcycle up on the porch.
but as long as I wasn't on the motorcycle,
Right.
and it was only in the car to take me home, but no date. For at least, I think it was about 7 or 8 months. And then he
Not too
finally
long.
let me go out, after he got to know me better.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's-
wasn't there something about he had to get rid of all the other girlfriends?
Oh, no, your
I wouldn't
dad,
think so.
granddad had nothing to do with that, that was me.
No, I was gonna say you were the one
I-
that said that if you want to date, right?
Well, what I did with your dad, he had so many girlfriends. But see, I would stay home and wait for him to call to go out.
Right.
And then I said, this ain't working. So Don Brabston, who was in the next town, had been after me to go out with him. So one night when he came and asked me to go out, I accepted. And that Saturday night, when Don went to go get his gas, I was in the car. And your dad pulled in to get his tank filled. And he looked over and he saw me with him. He figured, she's not gonna sit around and just wait on me. So that's what I did to him. I kept dating other guys, and I kept going out until finally he figured, this isn't gonna work. If I don't want her to date anybody, I've got to be more serious than I am. So that's when we became,
Exclusive.
Steady.
yeah, steady, as you call
You
it.
still didn't tell about the motorcycle on the porch.
The motorcycle, okay. Well, after I'd gotten to know him for a while, like I say, he always had somebody on the back of the
Right.
motorcycle. Always. And if there was a girl in town that wanted to ride on a motorcycle,
Sure.
John was there. So this day he was driving up and down the roads, and he wasn't going far with the girl because her mother said, you're limited, I only want you, to go as far as Midway, which was 2 miles down the road, and then come back. I don't want you taking her elsewhere on that motorcycle. I just don't feel good about it. So he finally agreed that he would just take her for a ride. But when he came back that day, we had what you called Red Dog.
Oh, right, you were telling us about that kind
Red
of
Dog
road.
was the
Stuff after they burned off.
it was the coal that was burnt, but the reason they called it red was because during the process it turned red. And his mother had that in her driveway. She didn't have a paved driveway. So when he came in from this area, which was to the left of the house,
Mm-hmm.
he always just stopped there at the bottom of the steps. But he couldn't stop. So he rode up the steps, and all before he could get it under control, he went all the way around that rapid porch. Remember the one
Right,
that
the
wrapped
porch
around?
went all the way around the house.
It went all around the
Oh my
house.
goodness.
And then he finally got it under control, that he wouldn't bang into the house and knock something down, or,
Lucky the porch wasn't cluttered.
well,
There's
the
porch swing and things on it.
the
yeah.
porch swing and 2
He's a
chairs,
Your
good driver.
2 or 3 chairs were on it. He had to miss a lot of furniture,
Yeah.
but he made it. And everybody always wondered how, God, did he ever get around their front porch? But he made it a clear back to the back room.
Yeah, because it was 2 right-angled turns.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
just,
Uh-huh.
'cause
It was
following.
an L. It was like, you have an L shape
Sure,
at the
yeah,
beginning.
wrap around,
At
yep.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Well,
But you have one more side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because that's what she had.
Mhm.
Here's the front door, front porch.
And this was John's mom we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, not his stepmother.
Yeah, your typical farmhouse back in Pennsylvania, a lot of them had, the little pillars, and then the porch just followed all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
From back door to front door, basically.
Yeah, Mrs. Figueroa was John's stepmother.
Oh, okay.
He never knew his mother.
So like he had 2 sets of siblings like you did, sort of? Or
3.
whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. See, his first wife, John's mother, was married 2 times before she married Mr. Figueroa. Because her husband was killed too.
Down in the
And
coal
then-
mines.
Yeah. And then Mrs. Figueroa was married 3 times.
Oh, wait a minute. No, you said 2 times, 3 times.
You said Mrs. Figueroa both times,
Yeah, you
but
said
maybe
Mrs.
you didn't
Figueroa
mean.
both times.
Mr. Figueroa
Was married
was
twice.
married twice.
Right.
Mrs. Figueroa was married 3 times because she had 3 sets of children to every man.
Wow.
Right.
So there was a lot of mixed
Spread out
families.
families,
There was an
yeah.
awful lot of mixed families during that time because there was an awful lot of men killed in the mines.
Between the war and the mines, yeah.
Well, the war hadn't started yet.
Oh, okay.
This was all just mines.
So wait a minute, but I thought John, that your husband John was in the service
Yeah, but
Yeah,
don't
he
forget,
not during a war?
you're talking
When he's young.
19. He didn't get out until 19.
It was 2 years.
Yeah.
That he was in for a little over 2 years.
So it was 1940 something.
47, I think.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Grandpap lost Dad's mom from spinal meningitis.
You're right.
Okay, like he was only a year old or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
And
all of those kids were, because Catholic Charities would normally come after
yeah.
families, because if you had a single parent, they felt you couldn't raise them on your own. So to save the families, then that's the reason there was so much remarrying pretty quickly to combine
So
households.
the church encouraged it.
Yeah, well, the church pretty much ruled the roost.
I mean, they were just going to take the kids.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
So that's
Wow.
why
they
she
were very
Wow.
aggressive. Yeah.
That's why she married him real fast,
Huh.
so that they couldn't have the 3 children. And she, of course, she had 2, so she had to worry too. So they got
Wow.
married. That's how that marriage
And then,
started.
then they had Elizabeth, right? That's the only
Uh-huh.
child they had together.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay.
Then they had Elizabeth.
So once you and John started dating, and towards the end of your senior year, I guess, how long did you date before you got married?
We got married when I was 21. He asked me to marry him. I had only been out of bed from tuberculosis for 2 months,
That's right, I forgot about tuberculosis.
and he proposed to me on my 21st birthday.
How long did you have tuberculosis? How long were you down?
I had tuberculosis. It was a disease I couldn't get rid of. I had it in three different times. They thought they had it under control, and then it would come back. And then once I got pregnant, they said, "No, we're not taking no more chances. You're going to a sanitarium." And that's where I was for the next 8 months. Till
But you
John-
got married before you had to go there.
We got married whenever I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
I went into the sanitarium right after my 22nd birthday, because I was pregnant,
Yeah.
because John was born when I was 23.
So basically, the tuberculosis, I mean, it sounds like as if, Dad and you were dating, and then your uncle, you contracted it from your uncle when you were 18, right?
Yeah, but I didn't put that in,
Yeah, so from 18 to,
Eh. 18 to 19, I was in and out of bed.
okay.
Out of bed for,
And then you got well, he proposed, you all got married.
right,
Or you thought you were well.
yeah,
Okay, all right.
okay.
And then you got pregnant with John a year later.
And yeah, and then we go to, when I came home from delivering John, I was home for about 2 days and then I delivered. And John had to be taken care of by somebody else for the first year of his life because I couldn't do anything for him. I wasn't allowed to do anything because my lung was still collapsed. So it was a hard time. Let's put it that way.
And you got your lung back when you moved down here.
They finally let my lung raise back up. I had it down when John was born in 52. I had it down for 4 years, so that was 46. So right a year before before I got pregnant with you,
50
is whenever
50,
my
56. You're going
Yeah.
back, yeah.
a year before you were born, my lung came up.
And that's why they would let you get pregnant with him.
Right.
I see. Okay. Okay.
And well, since I wanted to take the chance,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't going to guarantee me
Ah,
nothing. You know?
okay, yeah.
But they said it looked like everything was normal, all the scar tissue was gone. So yes, I could go back and start having a normal life like anybody else did. But it was a long time. It was a hard time on John.
Oh,
And my
sure.
mother and my dad.
So where was John working at the time?
He was working at the steel mill at that time,
Pipeline.
pipeline.
Yeah.
And that's, during that time though, that's when he started going to school. Because he knew I was being taken care of. My mother said, go do your thing. We've got this part under control. You go and get your education and work like he was doing every day. And he got his degree after 4 years
Wow.
of schooling. And that's when we finally came down here.
'Cause
So he was trained to be a mechanic?
Yeah. But before that,
Oh,
I
he
mean,
learned
what
it.
really motivated him was the bad conditions at Pipeline.
Oh, yeah,
Because he got the union in.
right.
He was the one
Wait,
that brought
what?
the union in, yeah.
And John,
The conditions were really bad.
pipeline was something that had no union or anything like that.
Does that oil
And
pipeline
They
being built?
lined pipes
They lined
with
pipe with,
toxic chemicals.
that was his job.
They lined
what?
pipes to protect pipes. They put
Ah.
coatings on pipes.
He came
Like-
home from work at night and his shirt was yellow,
Just from the
Yeah.
toxins.
just from the toxins in
Wow.
And so as he was going to school, he was like, okay, my goal is to get the heck out of this place. But I'm not going to let these people suffer like I have. So,
it. So the month before he resigned, he knew he was gonna resign. He brought the union in.
And
To-
then
to
they,
his brother's
they must have had to
dismay, right?
vote and stuff.
And
Oh, his brother didn't
oh,
like
his
it?
brother
Brother was
was one of,
management.
his brother was one of his
Wow.
bosses.
Oh my. One of the older batch of brothers, or?
Uh-huh.
uh-huh.
Well, it was his really, it
Right.
was his stepbrother.
Yeah, Pete, right?
Pete was his stepbrother. He did not have, John didn't have, he had one brother, but he was
Killed in the war.
killed in the war.
Oh,
So there's a lot to it.
So that was where John first learned mechanics, right? In the service with working on airplanes?
His brother told him, he said, you know enough about this stuff. I think you're gonna be a good mechanic. So he was an officer. So he had him not resign, but get out of the Army and go into the Air Force.
Aha.
Yeah, so his brother got him into the Air Force, and when you look at the certificate for Dad, it's called the Army Air Force. So it was like, I don't even know if it was really known.
Well, I don't
as-
think they'd separated it.
Yeah,
by
I don't
then.
think they had.
Yeah.
So, but on the listing, he's listed as a technician and a mechanic for, and it was like, just it gave a job description of like changing engines, you know, this sort of thing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that was like before they met, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. His days in the war got him into maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and he was
He
decided
pursued
on
it. when he
engineering
got out.
and maintenance. Yeah.
He pursued it when he got out.
Right. And he thought he was going to do engineering first, but then changed it to maintenance.
So how did you guys decide where to move to?
Okay. One day, John finished his education with flying colors. He was highest in the class with good grades. I get this telephone call one afternoon, and I think his name was Mr. Strayer or Stringer, something like that. Anyhow, and he said, "Mrs. Figueroa," and I said, "Yes," and he said, "You don't know me." He said, "But I know a lot about you." And I said, "Oh," and he said, "Yeah." He said, "John's one of my students."
Ah.
And he says, "I know you two have been through a lot." He says, "You would know your story. I know about your sickness and all that kind of stuff." He said, "But even though I think you're a very selfish woman."
Hmm.
And I said, "Oh?" You know, why would you think that? You haven't even met me." He said, "Your husband wants to be a mechanic so bad, and you refuse to move." He says, "I've had 3 places for you people to go to, and he never shows up for one of the appointments because you don't want to go." So he said, "I've got in my hand, I have 3 tickets for Washington, D.C. on such and such a date." He said, "And you also have motel with your flight back. And you will be there." He said, "Because I've already confirmed that you would be there."
And the interviews, 3 interviews.
And 3 in. He had 3 interviews for it with American, American, United, and Capital.
Okay.
And he said, "You will be there." I said, "Yes," you know, when he put it that way. And John came home and I told him, so we got ready and we went to DC and we came back in 2 days. And when he came back, he had 3 jobs.
Wow.
He had all 3 jobs. He could have his pick at any which one he wanted. So he called, it was Fisher. He called
That's
Mr.
the
Fisher
name. Yep.
and said, "Which one should I take?" He called whenever we were down in DC. And Mr. Fisher said, "By all means, take America."
But
Because they're on their way up.
And American had sweetened the pot because they made him like a senior mechanic.
Yeah, they
But
gave him.
he was on 90 days. If
Yeah.
he couldn't cut the mustard in 90 days, see ya.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a bit of a risk. You know, you could
But
come
we
in.
took the risk,
Yeah.
and everything worked out.
So you came down here, and where did you live at first?
That's another story. Anyhow, we came down, we flew down, we went to the hotel, and we stayed at the hotel. It was more a motel
Mm-hmm.
in those days. So we stayed at the motel for 2 days. And then Mr. Fisher, after he called Mr. Fisher again, he says, "You better start looking for a place." He said, "Because they want you right away. American Airlines wants you within the next 10 days."
Thanks.
So we knew then that we had to think about a house, you know. So we started looking for the houses, and the realtor took us around all day long. He stayed with us. And we kept saying we wanted to be close to the airport because we didn't know anything or anybody, you know.
Sticking to Alexandria
Well,
area.
sure, yeah.
You know, stick to Alexandria. And we know we might pay a little bit more, but we figured that we'd save in the long run. So we found this place down on 13 East Mason Street. That was the address. It was a beautiful duplex. It had 2 bedrooms and a bath. And the downstairs had a dining room, a living room, a kitchen, and we had a full basement. So we took the house. It was $85 a month.
Okay.
So
Good deal.
we figured we would rent the house for a
Mhm.
year. So we signed the contract and everything.
That was pretty expensive for back then, really, $85.
But Dad had it all figured out.
Yeah, yeah.
And we went back to, anyhow, we decided, well, we're gonna take one more look at it and measure the rooms to make sure no sense of transporting all that furniture down
It
if
won't
something
fit,
ain't gonna
yeah.
go, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we decided we would do that. The only thing is, when we started looking for the house, we couldn't find it. So we had to call a realtor back up. And he said, "You see that great big temple?" He said, "You can't miss it. It's the highest building in Alexandria."
The Masonic Temple.
Yeah,
It was
sure.
a Masonic temple. He said, "Go
That still
down
is.
that street on the Masonic temple, Mason, on East Mason. Go all the way down," and then he gave us the streets. And he said, "You turn right, and there's your house." So then we went back and we found the house.
And that's how you all
How
looked
old?
for it for a while.
Oh, we looked for it.
Yeah.
We drove around thinking we could find it.
But that was
It would be
always
embarrassing probably to have to call a realtor.
It was embarrassing to call them back. And he said, "I realize," he said, "you people are from the country." I said, "Oh, yes, we're from the country." So that was our first encounter with Alexandria. We stayed there for a year.
How old was your son when you moved to Alexandria?
3, John
John
was
was
3.
3. Okay, so
Yeah.
he was 4 by the time you left Alexandria.
Yeah, well, he was 3 when we brought him down. And we bought this house the next year.
The same.
We moved in that one in August the 1st.
Mm-hmm.
We moved in this one August the 1st.
What year was it by then?
John was 55,
55.
1955.
So the house had already been built, right? Was it built in 48 like ours was, or?
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
were all, this one this one was really built for the man that was designing the house.
The developer.
Always
Yeah.
a good sign. Yeah.
Mm.
So we had a fireplace and we had a basement. Those 3 houses over there on the side were similar to ours, but not as big as ours. So that's why John said it's got good possibilities, it's got land, and we have a house that looks pretty sturdy.
Mm-hmm. They are that.
And he said, "We'll take this one." So that's what we did.
So when was Ron born?
Ron was born in 57. So we were here for a few years because they didn't want me having
Still on so far. But the batteries.
they didn't want me having another child right away after I just started to recuperate and
Just
have
got
my
back
lung
into, yeah.
coming up normal. They figured I'd better wait for at least a year. before I tried to get pregnant again. And that's what we did. And that's our encounter.
So when you first moved here, were there any kids for John to play with?
Oh,
Oh my God, there are children everywhere.
Al's house, well, I'll give you a little bit on the house and then,
Okay.
anyhow, we moved into the house. We became friendly with Jane and Bill,
Mm-hmm. In our house.
and then we became, no, you didn't know them, but in Al's house, Joanne Nicely lived,
I thought it
and
was
her
Nicholson.
husband Bob.
Nicholson.
No, that was before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Joanne, the Nicholsons, no, the Nicholsons came later
Okay.
after Joanne left.
Okay. All right.
So we met the neighbors. Joanne was a big Swedish woman, but she was a rock, I'll tell you. You could want anything done or ask for some place to have to go to take me or something, and Joanne was always willing and able. She was like the rock, and strong along with it. And she had, at that time she had 2 children when she first came in. Then we became friends, and she got pregnant again. And she, this time she had a miscarriage. And I would take her kids overnight, and she would take mine. Even though we didn't have the spaces, there was always kids living at somebody else's house, because I knew she was going to the hospital in labor. I knew she and Bob wasn't going to be able to do anything with the kids, so I kept them. And then whenever I became pregnant with Ron, that's what she did for me.
Mhm.
She took John until my mother and dad got here for the next day, because we called them at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that I was going into labor. And my dad got in the car, and away they came.
Mm-hmm. Didn't take
So
too
she
long.
mustn't have been here long then. If
Joanne, well, they were military,
Ah,
so they were here for, I'd say 3 years. And then across the street,
that's when the Nicholsons moved in.
yeah, that's when the Nicholsons moved in.
Okay.
Then we had the Nicholsons, the Spillmans. Whose house was next?
Pine. But that was somebody else before Pine.
Yeah,
But didn't Mr. Pine help build these
yeah,
houses, or was
Mr.
it?
Pine helped to build all
Yeah,
these.
but they weren't the first ones here. It was another friend of John's, the kid who put the toys in the furnace.
Yeah,
So,
that was Smith,
this was,
the Smith. Then we had the Smiths, Eve and Dawn Smith.
that was it.
And I'd have a knock at the door in the morning. Eve, who was one of these people that loved her coffee, every morning she would appear on the scene, anytime she wasn't working, with coffee and donuts. Every morning.
Which house was this?
Where Conrad lives.
Where Conrad lives, so Mr. Pine's house, or Mr. and Mrs. Pine's
yeah,
house.
so the Smiths
between.
the Smiths lived there.
Okay.
And then the Pines moved in after the Smiths.
And who was next door here?
That was
Lindner.
Fritz and Betty,
Fritz and Betty
the
Lindner.
Lindners. They were here when we got here. And they were very friendly with us, very, very friendly. And Betty couldn't have children, and then all of a sudden she went to this one doctor, and she had 2 children. And they became great friends. And right before they left, though, we broke up because Fritz was getting to the point he was a nasty man. I hate to say that about anybody. I very seldom ever say it, but I mean, you try to do something for him, like the sump pump broke in his house one day,
Mm-hmm.
and John went and bought another one
Wow.
for them and put it in and everything else. Never said thank you. Never
What?
said
He
nothing.
got angry about
Because he got angry because he didn't get to purchase. See, he didn't let her buy nothing. She wasn't allowed to buy nothing unless Fritz gave the okay.
it. Yeah, I remember
He kept her.
when she'd be over here talking, and she would see the car coming down the road, she would jump over the fence and run back to the house.
Yeah,
Whoa.
So yeah,
it was weird.
it was very weird.
And then he became very obsessed with her not being over here, you know. I mean, at first they used to come over and have dinner and everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, something
Good old
happened there.
time.
And
He,
then-
all of a sudden he changed that dog. And he moved out of that house and nobody even knew they moved.
Yeah, they didn't tell anybody. They just left.
Wow.
They just left the neighborhood. She never said thank you for all that you've done. I had showers for her. It was just a weird,
They did stay in
Sit-
contact with the Schmeals though, for a little bit.
for a little bit. Yeah.
Meals?
The
That's a
Schmeals
funny
were, well, it was next to where Conrad lives, so that was Smith's, then there was Price.
Okay.
Okay, and then next to that was Sharps. The Sharps.
And then, that was until just a few years ago.
Right, and then the Masseys, and then the Schmeals, and then the Brownings, and then the Shankies, which was where Edward lived.
Right, so Shanky and Browning were also there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There was, at that time, there was 43 kids on the street.
It was pretty crazy.
By the time you were born, there was
Yeah,
three.
because on
Or-
this side there were the Spillmans, then Figura, Lindner, Butler, which was a house full.
Okay, yeah, they were still there when we.
Yeah, I don't know
moved in.
who was on Higuera. Higuera
Yeah.
was next. Hoover,
Okay,
and then
they
the
stayed.
rest I didn't know.
The last 3 houses, but those were the 3 houses where 2 men committed suicide.
Yeah, the two
Down
ends.
at the end.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They shot one. They both shot themselves.
it was kinda
No, I
weird.
think one hung themselves.
No, that was back here, Mrs. Moffat.
Yeah, but one of the men hung
Good
themselves.
Lord.
Yeah, they
too.
did. They did.
And Mrs. Moppin, who lived directly behind us,
Okay.
she committed suicide. She went and got her hair done and everything. Before she,
Wow.
yeah, then she went down the basement and hung herself. Oh, there's been
Sometimes you
some,
never know.
there's been some
People are so
bad,
happy.
killings,
Well, not
by
killing,
themselves.
yeah, taking of their
Yeah,
own lives.
yeah.
taking their own lives on the street.
Yeah.
And we don't know about anybody else,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
And something happened to somebody on further down Birch, but I don't know what it was.
So what was the story on Birch Lane? when were those houses built?
They were up when you moved in.
Birch was here whenever we were here.
What about the houses behind you?
The houses behind me, we had the 3 houses, 4 houses behind me.
On
The rest
Spring
of-
Valley?
right. The rest of them that were across the street weren't built at that time.
And you were saying, Ron, there was like a gravel pit you guys would.
Well, it was originally a gravel pit. That was more John. You know, they would go play down there.
Yeah.
We
They
would
were-
go play in the area that used to be the dam.
Dam? What
Well,
dam?
there was a dam that they had built to make that lake, because there was a lake back there to wash the gravel.
Where?
Back in Spring Valley area.
So kind of where the Indian Run stream is.
Yeah, and they blocked that up, and they would wash
Huh.
the gravel and everything there, and you
Oh,
know.
I see.
So
for business reasons, they made it.
yeah, but there were remnants of concrete and stuff that you could.
But I was looking at where we left off, and you were talking about the neighbors that lived here originally, in particular.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of more questions about, like, when these houses were first built, had the land before that, and I guess you had been woods or farmland?
It
or-
was all farmland.
It was farmland, so it was
Yeah.
cleared.
And they
most of
moved, they start building, did they say 48?
1948 was ours. I don't know if they were all built that year or not.
Supposedly they were all started about the same time, and it took a year or so to
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, a year or two to really complete the whole section, because they had 1, 2, 3 houses on there, that street.
On the other side of Birch Lane,
They had 3 streets. They had all of Pine Street.
Pine
It
Road.
was Pine Road was completed. Yeah, it was Pine Street when I.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. And the ones on the other side, they had, who was it, Mr.
Holt,
Holtz? Mr.
Henry,
Holtz?
Henry and Thelma
That was
Holtz.
the last house that was built on Birch.
Okay, so, and that road wasn't even theirs, right? I mean, this has something to do with why Al has 2 zip codes.
I can't remember. I can't remember if Pine, if Spring Valley went all the way down, or not Spring Valley, but Tunlaw. I can't remember whether it. I think it went all the way through, but maybe not. It was a dirt road, so it could have been that we had Pine Street, the little bit that we had on Birch,
Bert.
and Spring Valley.
Yeah.
I think that was it. Because I don't know whether, I know the other homes down at the other end wasn't in yet.
Okay.
Chambers' house wasn't there. That's where it stopped.
Oh, okay.
The brick house was always there. Since Al and I have been there.
The brick house that they're tearing up the front yard now, that one?
Yeah, the one that they tore down. They put that great big monstrosity.
Ah,
That was also on the street. And I think there was 2 other homes after the creek.
okay, so that street did exist. Isn't that peculiar that they give a different zip code to that one block? Or to me, it's peculiar.
It's not whenever you realize what they're doing. That's the end of Alexandria.
Okay.
Your house is the end of Alexandria,
And then it's Annandale.
and then it's Annandale. Annandale was really Birch Lane.
Okay.
That's what it is. And I don't know how far the Annandale the Alexandria address like we have
I
goes
think
in.
it's everywhere. You know, I know across the street from me, Teresa, and where Jessie and her family used to live, is Alexandria. It's our same zip code. So I think it's just that one block. And
I think it stops at Pine.
yeah,
I think it
Yeah.
stops at Pine Road,
Yep.
right at the intersection there, and then it's Annandale the rest of the way.
yep. And then you go across Braddock Road, and it's North Springfield.
Yeah.
So we live in the middle of
So
who
you're-
knows where.
you're-
Everybody goes to different schools
Yeah,
and
you've
all
got
that.
3 different segments in there, which is crazy. But that's the way the county did
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's the way they cut us off.
So you got to be good friends with the Chambers. When did they move in? Or Bess, for sure.
Ron was 3 years old when they moved in.
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3. So Ron was born in 57, so they moved in I would say 60. They had the house built.
Oh, okay.
So the house took a while to be built. And I think it was almost about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw them outside on the street one day, and they invited me over to see the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in, John and I went in, and we saw the house before it was even furnished or anything. We went in at the time they were still under construction,
Mm-hmm.
which made it nice.
Which house is this?
Best
Best
and
the
Jack's.
chambers.
Oh, when those are starting to go up over there.
They moved in when you were 2 years old,
Yeah,
because you were with us. I remember Bess went crazy about you.
okay.
Yeah. And they really settled in the next year, because it took them quite a while to move from Wheaton, Maryland. That's where they came in
Okay.
from. They got out of Wheaton and came into the Annandale area. Why, I don't know, but maybe it was closer to Jack's work. Yeah, Jack worked in Alexandria. That was it.
Yeah, 'cause Wheaton's a hike.
And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the reasons that they moved into the Annandale area. Because Bess could get on a bus,
Mm-hmm.
or she had carpool for a long time when they had that. So what else would you
Yeah.
like to know?
Partly more about our house. The
Your house, okay. When we came in, the house had the sun porch,
our house.
right. It did not have the back room on.
Right.
He had the garage, but he didn't have the back garage when we
Right,
moved in.
right, that
It
was-
was done later.
Yeah, because we had matching garages.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
And your
Well, we can
garage-
still see yours. It's just
Yeah,
slightly
yours
dwarfed by
is-
its
yeah,
twin.
yeah. John made it bigger and different roof and all.
But they were twins. I mean, they
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
For a
because they're
while
so
they-
close.
For years they looked alike, you know.
And the first thing that as I understand it, that Spillman did was upstairs make. I don't know if it was the
Okay.
gables.
Now,
and the-
what they did was, when we moved in, they had the 2 girls, but the youngest one, Colleen, was only a baby.
Okay.
She was just born. So whenever we went into the house the first time, the kitchen was exactly where it's at. Your stove and everything was not where it's at. There was a doorway there, and
Right.
you went into the living room.
where the dishwasher is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You went into the living room.
To the dining area, as they
Right.
considered it. Right.
They had a small dining area, but they didn't use that for a dining room.
And the
They
piano
used-
there.
They used the little room across for the dining room.
Okay.
And they had one bedroom at the end, like you do,
Right.
and a bathroom.
And then upstairs, was it finished
The
up?
upstairs had opened up like ours with a door.
Mhm. Oh, it had a door.
Oh yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And Bill knocked out that whole wall where you have those steps going up.
Mm-hmm.
He knocked out that wall that you're sitting behind right now
Dad had
in my house.
Okay.
Because Dad was
And-
telling him it's a supporting wall.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Huh.
And then he put that. He did the stairwell first. He had to have the stairs first.
So
He
the
had-
house.
he
Wait,
had-
wait.
It had stairs.
Had stairs, but he
was-
knocked them out.
He was going to rearrange the
Redo
whole
it.
upstairs, so he had to know where the stairs were going to go
Right.
to. So he put the stairs in.
He exposed the stairs.
Yeah,
And,
exposed.
well, I mean, the stairs
The
were,
steps were there.
were they finished?
Probably.
They were polished wood, weren't they, all the way up?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were hardwood.
Just
Yeah.
like ours are.
Yeah, they terminated at the top.
So
but
they were ready for somebody to do something
Yeah,
upstairs.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So upstairs, all you had was a big room, and that was it. That's what we all had.
Mm-hmm.
It was just completely.
But wasn't it exposed floors? You just had plywood up there, right? You could fall through. Didn't you have to go?
No,
feet?
you have, on the top of your upstairs, you have what they call a subfloor,
Yeah.
which
Which
you put
diagonal
the, which you
boards.
put the roofs, the ceilings on. Then you have great big, planks that are like,
Well, I mean,
4 or 5.
your joists.
Yeah, about 4 or 5.
But those
inches.
weren't exposed.
Oh yeah, they were all exposed.
That's what I thought.
You had to walk in between them.
That's what I meant.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it didn't have
In
the
other
floor
words,
yet.
if you walked up there without a floor on, you would go through the ceiling.
Right, that's what he
That's
was
what I was
asking.
saying.
Okay, that's,
So they had to put a floor down, or at
Mhm.
least a subfloor.
yeah,
Because it went all the way. You could see the eaves, right?
right.
It went all the way up, and you could
All the
see
way.
the airspace. The what do you call it? Where
The
There- it was
Ceiling joists.
there was no ceiling in my
Rafters.
place. You
Just
had a
rafters.
ceiling, you had a ceiling over there because I think somebody lived in that house before the spill.
Yes, they weren't the original, I don't
Yeah,
remember who
yeah,
lived
they
there
weren't
before.
I don't know who they were, and I never met them.
So they put in a finished ceiling then.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. So they had room to
And that
go.
dormer was in the back too, wasn't it? Mrs. Spillman's bought it. They probably didn't. move
No,
it.
I thought John helped raise the roof there.
Yeah, he
Your
did.
dad.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah, Dad helped them raise the roof.
Okay.
So what they did whenever they started, that's the first thing they did,
Mhm.
was they raised the roof. So they would know how much space they were gonna have for the bathroom and for that little room you
mhm.
have back there.
And then
Dressing
put on
room.
the dormers, I don't know if that was at the same time or.
No, they put the dormers on at the same time. We weren't as fortunate, we put one on one year, one on the next year. Because we didn't have that
Yeah.
kind of luxury of 2 people working,
Ah,
which they had,
gotcha.
and Jane had a good job.
What was she doing?
She worked for the postmaster at Maryfield. She was his private secretary.
Interesting.
And then, of course,
What was Bill doing, other than
Bill was-
dealing with old cars?
Bill sold insurance.
Okay,
He's always sold insurance. So he was an insurance man.
okay.
I think his parents had money because they sold one farm and then they bought this development on the corner up here by Giant.
Right.
Across from Giant, they had 5 acres there.
Where they used the wood to make the addition, to make the joists for the addition,
No,
the
they
oak
went-
joists for the
They
addition.
went to West Virginia to get those joists.
Well, maybe it was the pine part then. I don't know. I know that they told us that they used the wood for some aspect of what we call the oak room, although the only oak part is under the floors
Yeah.
and the dining room table, but that doesn't count.
The only thing is there was on that corner, there was a house and there was a shed and there was a garage
Which corner?
on a corner.
Backwick and Browder.
Back, Brassfield and back.
Oh,
You could see
gotcha.
the Spillman's
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
It was their business house. I mean, it was converted into their business.
It was converted into their business
The
after they
insurance.
sold the one property and bought the other property on the corner.
Okay.
And then they came in
Because
and.
it was a while before they put those townhouses in and they sold. It was back.
Oh, yeah,
I
it was a good,
I was in college when they did that. I think, or something,
Mrs. Spillman lived in that house, I would say, probably for 6 years before they sold it. Because they were waiting for the price to go up.
So wait, that was after they were in this house? So they didn't immediately move down to,
No. You're
No,
sorry.
I'm
Mrs. Spillman
confused.
as in Jane's mother.
Jane and Bill
oh,
didn't-
Jane's mother. Oh, I see, I see.
Jane,
Gotcha.
not Jane's mother.
I mean,
Bill's
Bill's mother.
Yes. Because
Mrs.
Jane's mother was Mrs. Nicely, right?
Mrs. Spillman.
Wait a minute,
She
Jane's
and her-
mother was Mrs. Nicely. Was that any relation to Joanne Nicely? Or was it a whole different Nicely?
Rita, her sister's name's Rita, Nicely, and Jane. There was only 2 girls.
Okay. Yeah, but you had said across the street was Joanne Nicely.
Oh, yeah, but that's a different
Separate family. And
Oh,
it's because such unusual name. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, okay. But that's your house, but it took Bill about, let's say took him a year and a half or so to complete that upstairs.
Yeah, so like that was in the 60s. And
That was
then,
after Ron was born,
Right. Because that's all. The only way I ever remember that house is with the
Yeah,
dormers
yeah.
on. And
so he
Yeah.
was about 2 years old whenever Bill started with dormers and we started with dormers because after Ron was born, John put 1 dormer on so we could put 1 bedroom up there
uh-huh.
because all we had to do was put down a floor.
Yeah.
And we had put a floor down because the walls were there. But the only thing is we had to put the drywall on like he
Right,
did.
right.
yeah, it was all exposed beams everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember the upstairs, the rest of it going in.
Yeah, all we had was the hall and the 1 bedroom at the time that we put
But I
it.
remember when that other one was going in,
Yeah,
because that's when you threw boxes in the fireplace.
yeah,
Almost caught the mantle on fire.
yeah, yeah. Now, what else, where do you?
So when did Al move in?
Al moved in, we moved, wasn't long after we moved in because Al finished college, so how old would he be by then? And I think he was out of college for a year or something like that.
He was that young?
Oh, yeah, Al was young,
Huh.
Al was young when he bought that house. So he's been here almost as long as we have, with the exception of maybe 4 or
Couple
5
few
years.
Because the Nichols, I didn't know them. They were friends with John
That's
briefly.
right. The
Yeah.
Nichols moved out, and then the Nicholsons nicely moved in. And then the Nicholsons moved in.
The
Remember the
Niceleys were here, then Nicholson's moved in
moved
briefly,
right.
and
They
then Al
ca-
bought
Then
it.
Al bought it.
Yeah.
And there was another owner before, Joanne, and her husband. So that house there was 4 owners to that house.
Yeah, so
This one, there's only 2. Yours, there's only 2.
So that one had a lot of.
well, maybe
turnover.
3. I mean 2 before us. Because Spillman's, like you said, didn't quite buy it new.
Yeah, so there'd be 3. You would be the 3rd one.
And then there was Marcia who rented.
And Marcia that rented.
Yeah. So,
You were moving
that
in, you were moving in, and we hated to see you come because we liked Marcia.
Because she was so
Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
Oh, you
her
didn't.
kids had you as like their grandmother, honorary grandmother. No.
We enjoyed Marcia, plus she was the first one that started a garden over there.
Oh, really? Because I thought you had told me at one point that
Bill,
and maybe this is true, that Bill trucked in a whole bunch of dirt full
Yeah,
of weeds from West
that's-
Virginia.
But he put in a whole bunch of dirt from West Virginia with all them damn blue flowers all over it that you and I still get.
yeah, there were
Every
creeping
spring.
Oh, those
Charlotte.
are everywhere. If you mean, and I'm not sure
Yeah,
which
but
ones you
that
mean,
was the beginning of them. We never had them before that. We
that
never-
could be.
that
Yeah.
We never had them in this area before. Bill moved in with that stupid
I mean, they're a
dirt.
native.
My,
So-
oh God, John, when he saw him with that dirt, he said, "Dear God in heaven, he didn't." He
It's
said,
rich, I'll say that.
He said everybody in the neighborhood's gonna have them damn blue flowers now. Which we,
And by that, we're talking about the ground
vines.
ivy or the henbit that comes early in the.
the blue ones that come up in the spring.
That are also like ground ivy. They just,
So are they the same, the ones that get into the lawn and they're,
Yeah.
you know, they have, continue with leaves in the summer?
Yeah.
Because
but it
the
does
flowers
bloom,
aren't there.
It does bloom.
It does
It
bloom
does
in the
bloom
summer.
in the spring.
And when you
But
step
I
on
gotta
it.
tell you, that is everywhere.
All right.
So I think
What were we just talking about?
we're talking about the weeds, and then we were
Oh,
talking
the
about
weeds,
dirt
yeah,
road
yeah.
of
Oh,
pine.
right, the dirt road, the fact that,
Yeah, Pine was
What's birch?
236 was a 2-lane highway.
okay.
So that's Little River Turnpike.
Braddock Road
What's 2 lanes?
was barely,
Yeah.
but it was almost a continuation of the dirt road.
Yeah, because it was gravel
It
and
was
tar,
gravel
Hmm.
and tar, but it wasn't.
which is what they used to do to our
Well,
road.
actually, I was gonna say, when we moved here, our
Yeah.
road was gravel and tar.
That's
Yeah.
that's
But
all
that's-
they did to it because we were so far in the country that
Right.
there wasn't no Etzel Park was here.
Okay.
Etzel Park was not here.
I was talking to John too, and he said that beyond the gravel pit, you know, he
Was
said,
not.
yeah, it was just all woods until
Yeah.
you got to Wayne Oak. So,
So
it was
all
Jefferson,
of that,
yeah.
you saw the main road up there. You saw those groups of homes.
Mhm.
Everything else was gravel pit. And that's where the kids played. Oh my God, did they come home filthy?
Well, it was woods.
They walked in the house and you had to put them in the bathtub.
Yeah, because John was telling me, he said that basically at Spring Valley, there was a little bit of woods, and then it was all excavated all the way down to Tunlock Fort. And then
Huh.
you had woods again, and
So
then,
those homes
and the
were-
woods were all the way to Wayne Oak. So he said that was just real thick woods with paths running through it, and of course still the creek and all that. So, by the time they had moved in, the dam for the washing and all that kind of stuff had been destroyed. And it was just the remnants of a gravel pit.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because they had already moved over to where the Virginia Concrete is now.
But they knew they were
Uh-huh.
going to start selling all those lots. And that's when the building back there started, was whenever John was probably in 5th grade.
Well,
So under our dirt, there's marine clay,
right.
right? But when you move up that way a little bit, it's gravel from the water
It was
running,
mostly
maybe.
sand, from what I understand, because they were excavating sand, is what John said. He said it was like a big
That's
beach.
so odd.
Yeah, and actually, I
I
remember going
suppose.
back there as a kid
Oh, yeah.
after the houses were built, and a lot of the edges of the creek had sand still, and I was always
Huh.
curious about that, and that's why, I guess, because they had excavated, they found an area that was sand,
Hmm.
and probably across over by Etzel Road found a bigger area that was sand, and started,
And
and
that-
gravel,
yeah.
and, you know, and started excavating that.
Not only then, the land over here so valuable on this side of the road
For,
because
We were already developing. by
we
then.
were already developing, but like Spring Valley was just coming in and all those streets back there.
But the gravel pit
and-
sold them.
And the high school wasn't there. There wasn't.
Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson wasn't built until John went into,
Or the houses behind it,
yeah.
so.
Thomas Jefferson went in John's, he went there the first
So
year.
where was the high school?
Annandale.
Okay, that's
was
older.
Everybody went to Annandale in this jurisdiction,
Right.
unless they had other special,
Because John graduated in 70,
yeah.
and so 4 years prior would be
68.
66,
60.
78,
66.
somewhere around there.
So did you go to St. Michael's up until high school and then?
He did. He went through 8th grade. Holmes Intermediate was built when I was in 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it grow up brick by brick. Actually, I didn't know about it. People started talking about Holmes here in the neighborhood. That's where they went. It was like, where is this place? And Dad and I went to go visit it, and it's like, wow.
And yeah,
So-
his dad said, yeah, instead of St. Michael's, you can come here, because it was a nice school.
It was gorgeous. And so 7th and 8th grade,
He went to.
I went to Holmes. I think it was only the second year it was operating.
Yeah.
Because
You
it
went
was.
to first year or the second
I think
year?
they had one class the first year, and then it finally opened up the rest of the way, because I just remember.
Yeah, a lot of
teachers-
times they'll start a school with
Yeah, because I
one
mean the
group.
teachers, a lot of them were new,
It's the
they
first
didn't know where
graduating
things
class,
were,
right.
and they were just as confused as we were. So it was.
And on Spring Valley, you had 4 houses at the beginning,
on
on our side.
their backyards facing our backyards. Yeah.
You had 4 houses up there. And I think the one on the corner was there.
Well, there was the one on the corner across too, 'cause that one burned down
Yeah.
during
So
the
there was one in
snowstorm.
this corner and one that over on this
So
corner.
that one that sits catty corner, kind of odd on the corner of.
Yeah.
That was there, and they rebuilt it in the same weird direction.
Yeah, I know.
With 2 doors and all that. So,
Well, there's been 2 families living in there for a long time.
Okay, but that was the one that burned during the snowstorm.
Yeah.
The fire department couldn't get to them. So yeah.
We'll get back to
Quickly.
moms in just a minute, but
Yeah.
you've been very instrumental to the discussion. Nobody even
Well, you can remember
knows who you
more,
were, what you
know,
were.
the deeds.
Yeah, well, growing up in the neighborhood and so forth. But I guess
Yeah.
we can go back to like Braddock Road and Pine Road and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean,
Well, there wasn't much to.
well, I mean,
I
the,
didn't-
Pine Road,
well, the Braddock Road.
Braddock Road, the houses stopped before the high school. In other words, there were no homes on Braddock Road except a great big farm house.
Really?
McClintock's
The
field.
Clintox.
Yeah.
McClintock's owned all that property over on the right-hand side of Braddock Road.
Across.
Is that like where there still is a farmhouse and some sort of
No.
flat
And
land?
they,
No, you're-
Fairfax County burned it down as part of their practice. And a lot of old farmhouses were. That's what
We're
Fairfax
talking
County
about
would do.
right across from Pine.
We're,
Oh, okay, like where there's that
All that
little dead
property,
end right now.
that
Yeah,
was a
gotcha.
farm.
and those are different homes than anything else. That little cluster there.
They were, yeah, I think
Yeah.
they've been very recently built when we moved in. I don't think
Yeah.
they,
yeah.
I think they
Well,
were there, but
Yeah.
not,
it was-
I wouldn't even swear to that.
Yeah, it was. They weren't going up when I was in high school, because I used to. We're at the beginning of high school because I used to go.
Because the
collect-
farmhouse was still there.
Well, the farmhouse was burned. It was there when I was in 7th and 8th grade because we would, 7th grade at least, because that's where the school
Yeah.
the bus would drop us off, and then I remember them having the practice and burning it down because everybody was considering.
But he
haunted.
owned all that acreage where those homes are.
And then it remained vacant for a while, and then for a couple of
Beautiful
years.
place.
So there's the stream, Indian Run Stream runs right by
Right.
that property. So is
Yeah,
that sort of
right
through
back.
the
And
middle
that was
of the?
that was called
farm?
Farmer's Pond area back
Aha.
then, because he had his own little pond with his own little dam, and he would shoot trespassers with
What?
BB guns.
Oh, Mr. McClintock didn't want people on his
Yeah.
property.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah.
He was different.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful farmhouse. I always
It was
wondered.
almost like an antebellum mansion. I mean, it was
Wow.
just gorgeous.
It was, you know how the one
So
is.
why was it their practice to burn such things
It
down?
was considered abandoned. It's just what they did once they were
Huh.
abandoned. There was back then in the '60s. There was no thought
Yeah.
of preserving for historical relevance or anything.
Have
It
you
just-
seen?
I guess.
You got
Have
rid
you
of it.
seen the way the farmhouse is that's on the golf course?
I didn't know there was a
Big
farmhouse on the
weight.
golf course.
There's a big white farmhouse. McClintock's was just like that.
Yeah, because there was also like Ravensworth Mansion over on Ravensworth Road by St.
Hmm.
Michael's, and that was burned down during practice for
gracious.
Fairfax County.
Yeah.
So
And Bailey's Crossroads. You want to talk about Bailey's Crossroads?
well, it was a carnival and originally an airport.
An airport.
Yeah,
Huh.
just
Yes.
private planes.
That's where John worked part-time.
Oh, really? Wait, John, your husband.
He had a job at American Airlines,
Right.
but when he wasn't working for American Airlines, he worked for these special 2 pilots
Huh.
at Bailey's. Every time there was a problem with the planes, he
Huh.
went and fixed them.
And that's why Skyline Towers, because those are so tall, they're like 26 stories,
Right.
where everything else around is like 16.
Right.
There were no height restrictions there. So Charles E. Smith could go up, 30
And
stories.
they thought they were gonna get a subway stop at one point.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why he was really focusing on that for that.
But at Bailey's Crossroads, you come up, what road is that? And
Columbia Pike.
Columbia
Pike.
yeah.
You come up Columbia Pike, and over here was the airport, and the kids had a playground.
And the crossroads were Route 7
And
actually.
Right.
there was two of the most beautiful stone homes
They're gorgeous.
over where Staples and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, the most beautiful homes you ever wanted to see. They had people coming in and manicuring all the lawns every week.
I thought there were more than two. Weren't there like two?
There was only two houses like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, 'cause
Then the
we're-
other two were up before you cross over.
Okay, so there were a whole
Shirley
group
Highway.
of them. It's like they all got into stone over there.
Yeah.
So.
And they were all stone homes, and they were beautiful.
And then they built the ramp. They put Route 7 over Columbia Pike. That's
Yeah.
what changed the whole dynamic. And then those houses were kind of just sitting on the clover leaf for a while. Just,
Huh.
and then
Until they tore them down.
Ah.
But they were beautiful. That was one of the. I always loved that area because I loved to go by those two.
Bailey's
homes.
Crossroads was lovely. It had a carousel, that's because you'll even
Well,
see.
it wasn't originally like quarters for the circus?
I believe so, and they always had a pony. They
Yeah,
had the pony
always
ride.
had pony ride.
Yeah, and they
and a
had
carousel.
carousels and all that. And of course,
And-
the airport. And
And then they had one of those things that you could get on. What was it? Wasn't a carousel.
roller coaster. I don't remember.
No, they had some of those small things.
Oh,
like
the
that.
go kart thing.
Yeah.
Ah.
Go kart track. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was never old enough to drive those. I remember John could, but I couldn't. So yeah.
You remember them resentfully.
yeah.
But that was Bailey's Crossroads.
That was a really cute area. That really was. But Braddock Road, I mean, with Mom saying there was nothing on it. I mean, things that most people don't realize is that, when you drive Braddock now, there's a lot of houses that sit up high, and there's a lot of houses that are seem like they're down inside of valleys. Braddock Road met all those houses. So,
What do you mean met the houses?
in other words, the road had huge hills.
Oh.
Huge hills. Up and down and up. We would giggle. Dad would
Really?
go over fast, and you just.
Oh, like Columbia Road was when we moved, Old Columbia. When
Yes,
we moved
yeah.
in.
it was
Yeah.
like
The roller coaster
same
road. was
same
before.
terrain. Yeah, and
Interesting.
because if you go to the end of Pine, that those last two houses are down below the grade of the road. Pine had a hill that met Braddock. You went downhill
Remember
just like
the-
Spring Valley.
You
You
know
have the
where
same hill.
Norman
Oh,
Laird,
right,
you know
right.
where the Lairds lived? In that white house that stood on the hill over on this side between Pine
Not
and
on the corner?
Spring Valley.
They're
No.
right between Pine and Spring Valley.
Oh,
That
right,
used
right,
to be
right,
a
right. That
great
is
big-
hilly.
They took that great big hill away eventually.
Right, that's
But that
right.
was the first hill that you had to go over.
So Pine you were way up there, and then you were heading down a major hill going all the way down to the creek when you hit Pine. So it was very dangerous because, you were turning right in the middle of a hill.
We're talking about Braddock.
Right.
Right,
Mhm.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So
And-
these houses weren't flattened like that, or
No,
I mean the
just,
ground.
Just anybody close to Braddock.
Right.
Braddock Road. It
Yeah,
was- it
and
was-
then if you go to, for instance, Braddock Road went all the way to the creek. Where that bad turn is? The bad turn was there, but you went all the way down to the creek on Braddock Road.
Oh.
Then you climbed all the way up to the
Whoa.
Laird's house, okay? And then you dipped way down again to the other creek.
Mhm.
And then you climbed
For
again
heaven's
where
sakes.
Jefferson is. So yeah, there was
Still goes way down for the other.
It
people.
was.
yeah, it was
it
major,
was- it
major
was-
hills.
it was-
And it was
Yeah.
also, Braddock Road was off on the other side of the median strip. So those people their front yards used to go to what is now
The
the
middle.
So they always had a meal strip? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
those were their yards.
The Laird's,
Oh,
their
oh.
Laird's house went all the
The
way down to
westbound
the
lanes
middle.
of Braddock Road were all yards.
They cut away
Ah,
his whole
gotcha.
hill. That ruined that whole house.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the Braddock Road
Because he
was
sat on a
only two.
hill and had a nice driveway and everything. And
So if you're heading towards Jefferson, the people that are on the right hand
From here.
side, yeah, they didn't lose any front lawns, but they lost views because the road went with their houses.
Mm-hmm.
But the people over here on our side, they lost major property.
Right, I mean, now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about when you walk by there and they try to plant, it's so steep, try to
Mhm.
plant with whatever
Because that's
ivy
a
or,
cut. Yeah.
yeah.
So that's where they cut through Braddock Road.
yeah.
So, I mean, it certainly made it safer to drive on, but God, what they did to those houses, it was just, because it was really pretty. You know, everything just
Oh,
rolled
it was
right
a
with it.
pretty area.
Just like Old Columbia Pike.
Well, and the a little farther down Braddock to the west, you know, there's that section that's Parkway now. But when we moved here, that
That was two
continued
lanes,
for
yeah.
quite a ways and was
Mhm.
an awful pretty road. But
Right.
Yeah.
So they
then
did the
needed
same thing here.
lanes. Yeah.
Because originally, I think when you were here, it was just 2 lanes, wasn't it, down there? Or was it 4 already?
I think it was 4.
But they didn't have that big median in the middle and everything, I don't think, at that time. Because they've got all those wide medians with the trees now.
They had that.
They did?
They had it. They had it continuing on past 495 when
Oh,
I
okay.
moved there, and they had this big project they did on Braddock Road right when I had to be driving Molly to catechism that
So-
way, because we went to the faraway church, because that's where
Yeah.
Yeah.
the grandparents were.
But mine was dirt with a rut in the middle.
But
Oh, right in the middle.
we were the only people out here for a long time until they started building Etzel Road. And then they started building the one across the street where Aunt Catherine lived. What was that one called?
Verde Court and all that.
Yeah, Verde Court. And what they call that, something else? Where those gas stations are at in the school.
Parkview, I think it's called Parkview. Something like that.
Park Lawn?
Oh, Park Lawn. There's a school at Park Lawn, and
Yeah,
there's a
that was
there's
Park
a
Lawn back there.
yeah.
What's
and
that development called right across the street from it?
Yeah.
that has all the national park names for this night, like towards Glasgow Middle School, or which street?
Down where you used to take Molly and them, you used to go through that development,
Yeah.
down to their school.
Yeah.
What was the name of
I don't remember the name of the development. I just know the name. All the street names were national parks.
that? Yeah, I know it as well as I know my,
Yeah.
because I have friends that live up there. Jenny lives up there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, they used to have names for, I mean, like we were Braddock Acres for years. They had there's a sign over on Spring Valley now
Mm-hmm.
that has basically, you know, the old board, it almost looks like rough timber, you know, logs, you know, holding up the sign. Those were like that all around here. Everybody, Tall Oaks had one, Braddock
Oh, I
Acres
see what you're
had
saying,
one.
yeah.
Everything was labeled.
There's one at Spring Valley. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it still exists over there. Right where
Where?
the Y is, on the other side of
Oh, okay.
Braddock Road.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called something Hills, but it's tucked in the woods.
Well, the other side of Braddock Road.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and that was sort of the style that everybody had for the little neighborhoods. So there was one labeled Braddock Acres, one labeled Tall Oaks.
Where was Braddock Acres then?
Braddock Acres was us,
I know. I said, where was the sign set?
up here on Braddock Road in Birch. Yeah.
I want to thank you for all the help you've been to. Wow.
Oh, this has been
Yeah,
fun,
you helped
and I
a lot.
really appreciate you guys doing this. So, I mean, it's,
Something they thought about.
well, it's been something we've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And if you all
Yeah,
maybe
and I'd
have
been
with
thinking about the-
Conrad and with,
Yeah.